When my mom fell to her knees sobbing, begging me to save my brother's life with my kidney, I thought I was stepping up for family. But I had no idea what she was hiding. I always believed that family meant sacrifice. My mom drilled that into me since childhood. Blood is thicker than water. So when she grabbed my hands that night, her eyes red and swollen from hours of crying, I froze. "Sweetheart," she choked out, her voice breaking as if the words themselves cut her throat. "Your brother is dying. The doctors say he won't make it without a kidney. And you're his only match." I felt the room tilt. The air pressed heavy against my chest, and for a moment I couldn't even breathe. My brother, my obnoxious, smug older brother who always seemed untouchable, dying? Mom squeezed my hands tighter, digging her nails in as if to anchor me to her desperation. "Please," she whispered, her tears sliding down onto our knotted fingers. "If you don't do this, he's gone. I can't lose my son." My throat tightened. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could manage was a broken exhale. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against my knuckles, her whole body shaking with sobs. I'd never seen her like this before, raw, vulnerable, desperate. And guilt, thick, choking guilt, wrapped around me like chains. Because what kind of person even hesitates when their own brother's life is at stake? I nodded before I even realized I'd done it. "Okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'll do it. I'll give him my kidney." Her sobbing shifted instantly, almost too quickly, into relief. She cupped my face with both hands, smiling through her tears. "You're saving him. You're saving us." The words echoed in my head long after she left the room. Saving us. But beneath the guilt and the fear, something else stirred in me that night, a faint unease I couldn't quite name. The following days blurred into endless hospital appointments and blood tests. Doctors spoke clinically about risks, recovery time, and compatibility. My mother hovered constantly, her hand clutching my arm, repeating the same mantra. "You're doing the right thing." My brother, though, was another story. He didn't thank me. He didn't cry. He didn't even look afraid. Instead, he smirked at me across the hospital room as though I owed him this, as though my kidney was nothing more than his birthright. "Guess you finally get to do something useful for once," he muttered one evening when Mom had stepped out to talk with a nurse. The words stung like acid. I wanted to snap back, to remind him of every cruel thing he'd said growing up, every fight where he treated me like I was disposable. But instead, I bit my tongue. After all, he was dying. What did it matter now? Still, the unease grew sharper. Why did he seem so calm? Why did he almost look smug? At home, Mom's behavior only amplified my doubts. She guarded her phone and tablet like they were lifelines, never letting them leave her side. She snapped if I asked too many questions about the surgery or the costs. "Don't burden yourself with the details," she'd say, brushing me off. "Focus on healing after the operation. Leave the rest to me." But the way her eyes darted away, the tremor in her voice, they didn't sound like truth. They sounded like lies. And yet, every time I tried to push back, guilt crushed me. "You don't understand what it's like to lose a child," she snapped once, her tears returning on command. "I carried you both. I can't bury one of you. I won't survive it. Please, don't make me beg again." How do you argue with that? So I stayed silent, swallowing the doubts clawing at my throat. I told myself I was paranoid, overthinking. But deep down, I felt it. The story wasn't adding up. The night before my next round of hospital tests, I couldn't sleep. I paced my room, trying to steady the pounding in my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's face, wet with tears, trembling with desperation. But I also saw my brother's smirk, and I couldn't reconcile the two. At around 2 in the morning, I went to the kitchen for water. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you. That's when I noticed it, Mom's tablet, glowing faintly on the counter. She never left it unattended. My heart hammered. I shouldn't touch it. I knew I shouldn't. But something inside me, curiosity, dread, maybe both, urged me forward. My hand hovered over it, trembling. All it would take was a swipe of my finger. I told myself I was just checking the time, justifying the guilt before I even gave in to it. When my fingertip finally brushed the screen, the tablet lit up, flooding the dark kitchen with pale light. And there it was, an open document halfway down the screen. Not medical records. Not prescriptions. Something else. Something that made my stomach drop into ice. The glow from the tablet burned into my eyes, but it was the words on the screen that seared into my brain. It wasn't a medical document. It wasn't an email from a doctor. It was a spreadsheet. Numbers. Dollar signs. Payments. Notes scribbled in digital ink across the margins. At the very top, bold and unmistakable. Kidney money, agreement with Daniel. Daniel. My brother. I scrolled down with a shaking hand. Dates, transactions, large sums of money. Some labeled advance, others marked final after procedure. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might wake the house. What the hell was this? Why would my mother have a file tying my brother's supposed surgery to money? I skimmed further, my stomach twisting with every line. The procedure wasn't about saving his life. It was about leveraging my donation for a payout. Insurance fraud? A deal with some desperate buyer? I didn't understand all the details, but I understood enough. This wasn't about saving Daniel. It was about using me. The walls seemed to close in around me, the weight of betrayal pressing down until I could barely breathe. The next morning, Mom was cheerful. Too cheerful. She hummed as she made breakfast, sliding a plate in front of me as if nothing were wrong. You're a hero, she said, her eyes shining. I've been telling everyone how brave you are. Her words made bile rise in my throat. Brave? No. I was a fool. Daniel shuffled into the kitchen a few minutes later, not looking sick, not looking frail. In fact, he looked fine. Too fine. He poured himself coffee, stretched, then dropped into the chair across from me with a smirk. You look like crap, he muttered, stirring sugar into his mug. Don't worry, you'll bounce back after the surgery. It's not like you really use your kidneys for anything, anyway. The audacity of him. The arrogance. He wasn't scared, wasn't grateful. He was smug. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. You know, most people would say thank you. I managed, my voice colder than I intended. He raised an eyebrow, that smirk never leaving his lips. Why? You're just doing your duty. Family first, right? Mom always said so. The way he said it, so casual, so dismissive, made my blood boil. Family first. As if the phrase was a leash around my neck, pulling me into obedience. I forced myself to stay silent, but inside, suspicion roared louder than ever. That afternoon, Mom dragged me to another appointment. While we sat in the sterile waiting room, I studied her. The way she tapped her foot nervously. The way she checked her phone over and over. Every part of me screamed to confront her, to demand answers about that spreadsheet. But something held me back. Maybe fear. Maybe strategy. If I confronted her too soon, she'd have excuses ready, crocodile tears to drown me in guilt again. So instead, I smiled faintly, pretending to be the obedient child. She bought it. Or maybe she wanted to. That night, alone in my room, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The sobbing, the pressure, Daniel's smugness, the spreadsheet. Pieces clicked together one by one. Daniel wasn't dying. At least, not the way they'd told me. Maybe he had some condition, maybe not. But whatever was happening, it wasn't desperate. And it sure as hell wasn't about love or survival. It was about gain. Money. Manipulation. Control. And I was the pawn. My chest ached, not from fear this time, but from rage. They were willing to cut me open, rip a part of me away, not because it was necessary, but because it was profitable. I thought about every time Daniel mocked me growing up. Every time Mom took his side, painting me as dramatic or ungrateful. Every moment I was made to feel like I wasn't enough. And now, even my body, my organs, were theirs to claim. The fury burned deep, sharp, and cold. The next day at the hospital, I noticed something I hadn't before. When the doctor stepped out of the room, Daniel leaned back in his chair, stretching casually. He glanced at Mom, and she gave him a small nod. It was quick, subtle. But I saw it. It wasn't fear or desperation passing between them. It was confidence. Agreement. They weren't two broken people clinging to hope. They were co-conspirators. And I was the mark. The realization almost knocked the breath out of me. They were both in on it. That evening, while Mom cooked dinner and Daniel lounged on the couch scrolling through his phone, I sat at the table with my untouched food. Not hungry. Mom asked, glancing at me. I shook my head. Just tired. Daniel snorted. Better get used to it. After the surgery, you'll be wiped out for weeks. His laugh followed me all the way to my room, searing itself into my brain. And it was in that moment, shutting my door, that the shift happened. I was no longer just a victim caught in their lies. I was something else. A spark of defiance lit inside me, burning brighter than the fear. They thought I was weak, naive, gullible enough to hand over part of myself without question. But they had underestimated me. And soon they would regret it. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that spreadsheet burned into the dark behind my eyelids. The numbers, the payments, the damning title at the top. Kidney money, agreement with Daniel. I needed more. One glimpse wasn't enough. I had to know everything. So, 2 nights later, when the house was silent again, I crept into the kitchen. The tablet was there, charging on the counter. My pulse thundered in my ears as I slid it into my hands, praying the screen wasn't locked. It wasn't. I scrolled past the spreadsheet and found a chain of emails. Dozens of them, all sent over the past few months. The subject lines chilled me. Insurance claim strategy. Payment schedule after donation. Risk versus reward, family donor. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. Dear Mrs. Collins, it began. Once your son receives the donor kidney, we'll process the insurance claim for the maximum payout. You'll be compensated in full, minus administrative deductions. As we've agreed, your elder son understands the arrangement. I scrolled further, my stomach lurching with every word. This wasn't about saving Daniel. He wasn't at death's door. He wasn't even on the transplant list the way I'd been told. It was all a setup. If I donated, the insurance company would process it as a life-saving transplant and pay out a massive settlement. Mom and Daniel would pocket the money. My sacrifice would be their payday. My breath hitched, the tablet nearly slipping from my shaking hands. And then came the worst part. Buried in a draft folder was a message Daniel had written but never sent. A rant to a friend. She's such a sucker. Always has been. Mom guilt-tripped her just like I said she would. Can't believe she's dumb enough to go through with it. Easy money, man. Easy. The words blurred as my vision swam. My throat closed, my chest tightening until I thought I might actually collapse right there on the kitchen floor. He knew. He planned it. My brother, the one I was about to give a part of myself to, was laughing about it behind my back. And Mom was helping him. I set the tablet down carefully, my hands numb. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the counter, unable to move. Every childhood memory with her, every whispered promise that family meant everything, shattered in that moment. It was never about family. Never about love. It was about control. About greed. I wasn't her child anymore. I was her investment. And Daniel wasn't my brother. He was her partner in betrayal. The next morning, I couldn't look at either of them without my stomach twisting. Mom bustled around, humming, her face bright with fake cheer. Daniel lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. And me? I smiled. I laughed at the right times. I played my role. Inside, though, something shifted. The pain didn't fade, but it hardened into something else. Something sharp. Rage, cold and clean. They thought I was weak, that I'd fold under guilt, just like I always had. But they had no idea what they'd awakened. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about storming into the living room, screaming at them, throwing the tablet in their faces. I thought about demanding the truth, about telling them I knew everything. But then what? They'd cry, they'd deny, they'd twist it back on me like they always did. No, that wasn't good enough. This betrayal deserved more than confrontation. It deserved consequence. And if they wanted to play games with my life, they were about to learn that I could play too. The next hospital appointment became a stage. Mom squeezed my hand, whispering prayers under her breath. Daniel joked with the nurse, pretending he was brave. I smiled faintly, keeping my rage buried deep where they couldn't see it. But inside, I was taking notes. Listening. Observing. Waiting for my chance. Every word from the doctors, every paper Mom signed, every nod Daniel gave, I memorized it all. Because when the time came, I would use it against them. That night, back at home, I sat in my room with the tablet glowing in front of me. My heart raced as I copied every email, every file, every damning piece of evidence onto a flash drive. I read through them one last time, my anger burning hotter with each line. My brother's smug words. My mother's fake tears. The plan to carve me open, not for love, not for survival, but for cash. I clenched the flash drive in my fist, the plastic digging into my palm. They had no idea. But soon they would. I slept with the flash drive taped under my pillow for 3 nights. It felt ridiculous and necessary at once. Ridiculous because it was just a sliver of plastic, necessary because inside it was the ledger of their betrayal. Every email, every payment schedule, Daniel's crude messages, my mother's signatures. Anger had been the first reaction. Strategy came next. I stopped acting like the shocked, obedient child. Instead, I became the placid one, the calm before a storm. I smiled. I signed forms. I answered questions in polite, measured tones. I let them believe me. But behind my face, I moved. First, I created redundancy. I uploaded the tablet files to 3 different cloud accounts under names they would never trace back to me. I emailed copies to myself using throwaway addresses. I printed hard copies and hid them in places I knew only I would find them. Inside a book I'd never open in public, taped under the gym locker bench I still used, folded inside the lining of an old winter coat. If anything happened to the flash drive, the truth wouldn't vanish with it. Then I recruited allies, quiet, unlikely ones. It was a nurse, actually. Mid-50s, steady hands, the sort of woman who'd seen too many human dramas to be shocked easily. I'd noticed small things about her during the tests. The way she watched how families behaved, the little frowns she gave to obvious manipulators. One afternoon, under the pretense of asking about recovery times, I asked her a neutral question about transplant ethics. She paused, and then she surprised me by being blunt. There are rules. You can't fake the urgency. You can't coerce a donor. Insurance fraud happens, but not without someone noticing. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. If you're worried, document everything. Talk to social work. Or the transplant coordinator. They'll listen if you have proof. I didn't mention the spreadsheet. I didn't need to. I left with her words lodged in my chest like a splinter. Social work. Transplant coordinator. Official channels. They sounded bureaucratic and slow, but they were also movable parts one could use. Next, I made a call I never thought I would. Not to an enemy. To an investigator. There's a reporter who covers hospital scandals in our city. The kind of journalist who smells a cover-up and will dig until he finds rot. I found his email address buried in an old article and wrote a short, anonymous tip. Financial scheme involving transplant insurance fraud. Family names and documents if interested. I attached a single, redacted screenshot from the files. Damning, but not complete. If he wanted the story, he'd ask. If he didn't, I'd try someone else. Then came the hardest part, turning my family's confidence into my tools. I let Mom and Daniel believe the operation was on schedule. I told them I'd booked the pre-op appointment. I agreed to one more compatibility test. I even volunteered to bring snacks to the waiting room during their consultations. Every move was theater. At night, I rehearsed what I would say and what I would not say. I wrote scripts on paper, then tore them up. I mapped timelines in my head. When the surgery would be scheduled, who would be in the OR, which staff members we could trust. I made contingency plans for every possible denial, every crocodile tear they might shed when cornered. I also weaponized small humiliations. I started leaving little, innocuous mistakes within Mom's reach. A printed copy of an email left too casually on the kitchen table. A voicemail on a shared phone that played a snippet of a threatening message sent to Daniel by one of his shady associates. They noticed, of course. They panicked a little. Their microreactive fear told me they were worried I suspected something. That was good. Fear changes people. It makes them sloppy. The reporter wrote back within 48 hours. He wanted to meet. He wanted to see documents. He didn't believe anonymous tips for food. I arranged the meeting for a public cafe, then backed out at the last second. Instead, I left a sealed envelope with the full files in his office mailbox. At noon the next day, the reporter called a number I'd acquired through a friend and asked to meet. He was intrigued. He said the right things. He promised discretion. He never once asked for my name. That same week, I booked an appointment with the hospital's transplant coordinator under the pretense of clarifying donation logistics. I walked into a fluorescent office with everyone's reservations and lies neatly filed. I asked simple questions. What qualifies a recipient for immediate transplant listing? How are insurance payouts handled if the procedure is elective? The coordinator's answers were technical, precise. Her face tightened when I casually mentioned that my brother seemed suspiciously calm. If anything feels off, she said, document it. We can audit claims. We can flag cases for review. But it has to be provable. Her tone was official, not moral. If you have paperwork that suggests fraud, bring it to our compliance office. Proof. Documentation. Audit. Compliance. The words fell like nails into a coffin I was building for them. I kept my next moves invisible. I registered a complaint under a pseudonym with the hospital's compliance office and attached copies of the spreadsheet and emails. I asked for confidentiality, for an internal audit. I didn't expect miracles. I expected a bureaucratic grind, which is why I kept pushing other levers. The week before the scheduled operation, small tremors began to show on their faces. Mom's gratitude was edged with nervousness. Daniel stopped lounging as easily. Once, he stormed into my room unexpectedly and demanded to know why I'd been distant. "Save the act," he spat. "You're doing this. Don't make it weird." "You're the one making it weird," I said softly. "You should be grateful." He laughed, but there was no real mirth behind it. He left, slamming a door so hard the frame rattled. On the morning I'd planned my final move, I woke before dawn. The house was a map of ordinary life: coffee mugs, a school bag slung by the door, a television left on a muted morning show. They thought the ritual of normality would shield them. They were wrong. I dressed in something inconspicuous: jeans and a sweater. I slid the flash drive into an envelope and left it on the seat of my car, but I also carried a key piece of theater. A printout of Daniel's draft message, the one where he called me a sucker, and a copy of the emails showing the payout schedule. I had copies everywhere. I had witnesses and potential allies. I had a reporter who smelled blood and a hospital compliance office with a file already open. And I had one last plan I hadn't told anyone about. At 9:30, the pre-op nurse called to confirm arrival times. I answered calmly. "We'll be there," I said, and noted the voice on the line, the nurse's name, her cadence. I hung up and sent a short, unsigned email to the transplant coordinator. "Please ensure transplant scheduling is on hold pending audit. I have submitted documents." Then I deleted the draft so it left no trace beyond the sent copy. Everything was set to intersect. The morning of the operation arrived. The house smelled of burnt toast and cheap coffee. Mom moved with the practiced composure of someone who had rehearsed vulnerability until it looked like an art. Daniel adjusted his watch, smiling with the brittle calm of a man about to get what he wanted. I walked out the door with them, my mouth dry, the sun sharp and indifferent. Today, I thought, would be the day they learned not to gamble with people's lives. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee. My palms were damp, but my resolve had never been sharper. My brother sat smugly in the defendant's chair, dressed too well for a man who'd nearly stolen my life. Mom sat beside him, eyes red, her hand clutching his like he was the victim. The judge entered, and the room hushed. My lawyer rose, presenting the file I had found. The file on Mom's tablet that had shattered every illusion I once had about family. Pages of bank transfers, messages between her and my brother, and even a half-completed document outlining how they'd access my bank account after the surgery. The gasps in the courtroom came like a tidal wave. My mother's lips trembled. My brother's smugness dissolved into panic. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," the judge said coldly, "this goes beyond family betrayal. This is fraud, coercion, and attempted exploitation." I stared at them, my heart a battlefield of grief and fury. This wasn't the family I thought I had. This was a nest of vipers, willing to bleed me dry, literally, for their comfort. When my brother was sentenced to prison and my mother faced charges of conspiracy, I expected to feel joy, triumph, maybe even peace. Instead, I felt a hollow ache, like the part of me that still wanted to love them had been amputated. But here's the twist they never saw coming. I didn't just expose them. I made sure their lies, their manipulations, their greed were laid bare for everyone they'd fooled. Our family, our friends, our neighbors. The people who once called them selfless and devoted now whispered words like monsters and parasites. They didn't just lose me. They lost their masks. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. If I were in this situation, here's what I would have done. I would have trusted my instincts the first time doubt crept in. I would have demanded transparency before making such a life-changing decision. And most of all, I would have remembered, real love never comes with manipulation attached. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.